A terrible song sounded, from which the heart trembled, like the snow-white feathers of birds soaring into the sky. The birds left the city below engulfed in flames and destruction. It seemed as if the gods themselves had abandoned this city and its citizens. People ran in panic in different directions trying to save their lives. They screamed and called for help. In the skies above the city, a fourth-level dark angel sang a terrifying song of destruction. The flapping of the angel's wings caused flames to rage and buildings in the area to collapse at incredible speed. Below, two girls watched the actions of the angel of destruction with alarm. The red-haired girl said with horror that they were facing a level 4 enemy. Such monsters could wipe out an entire country. The blonde grabbed her friend's hand and offered to fight together, to which the red-haired girl ordered her to take up saving people. The senior in rank looked at the monster with despair, knowing full well that she would not be able to defeat him. The blonde tried to resist her friend's decision with tears in her eyes, but she only said that everything would be fine. After all, national intelligence had already detected the opening of the portal, and support was supposed to arrive soon. The red-haired girl, heading towards the monster, thought that she was only a third-level awakened person, and the main thing was to hold out until support arrived. The monster in the form of a fallen dark angel with empty lifeless eye sockets unnaturally turned its head and looked towards the awakened one. The monster lunged at the girl, and his eyes lit up with a red flame, and the awakened one, ready to take the blow, ordered her friend to run. Suddenly, the girls heard a low voice behind them demanding that they get out of his way. Behind the awakened one, an unknown man had already jumped in an attack, and the girl froze, feeling a strange aura. The guy hit the dark angel in mid-flight, causing him to fly to the side and freeze. After the attack, the unknown man in strange clothes turned to the girls, and the monster behind him turned into stone and crumbled. The three stood in front of the wreckage of the slain angel, and questions flashed through the head of the red-haired awakened one about who was in front of her, and how he managed to defeat her with one blow. The guy looked at the girls, smiled and asked, as if to himself, if he saw people in front of him. Afterwards, the unknown man asked the girls what year it was, to which they were surprised and first asked who he was. The man asked again, but this time instead of a smile, there was only a desire to kill on his face. The awakened one replied that today was the 6th of October, 24, and the man, surprised, repeated her words. The veins appeared on the guy's face, and he thought with bitterness that he had been in hell for hundreds of years, and now only a year had passed. Lost in his memories, the guy thought that he had miscalculated, and the time distortion turned out to be much worse, because exactly a year had passed. Exactly 1 year since I, being an ordinary person living a completely ordinary life, met my enemy. He then entered a hell known as the demon realm of Rigo, where the hero spent hundreds of years. The man recalled that it was an unimaginable period, but in the end, he emerged victorious and was able to return. At this time, two girls were watching the guy with surprise, discussing who he was. Looking at him and his strange clothes, the red-haired girl thought that if he was an awakener's rank, then she, as an intelligence representative, should have known. Suddenly, a large black car, packed full of awakened people, stopped right in front of the man. Led by the commander, the squad of awakened people got out of the car and, on command, everyone took their positions. It turned out that the group that arrived was led by leader Jack, who approached the red-haired girl, called her Serena, and asked where the enemy was. At this time, one of the squad members stumbled upon the mysterious hero and began to chase him away in a rather rude manner. Serena immediately asked her leader to stop the guy, because he did not know what kind of power the stranger possessed. The hero looked angrily at the awakened man and said that he had 3 seconds to prove that he deserved to live. Leader Jack was informed that this stranger had just destroyed a level 4 monster, and this information left him very puzzled. Awakened, He put his weapon in front of him and thought that if he couldn't cope with this stranger, he would die. With a quick movement, the awakened one moved forward in an attack, attempting to use his blade storm technique. However, the stranger stopped his attack and parried it with just one finger, causing the guy to fly to the side. Leader Jack ran towards the injured ally, shouting at the stranger about what he was doing. In response to the group leader's attacks, the stranger pointed to the sky and said that they should not worry about him now. At this time, another terrible portal opened in the sky, which did not bode well. A terrifying roar was heard from a huge red monster of the 6th level, which looked like a dragon. Leader Jack immediately contacted the special service, reporting that a 6th level enemy codenamed Red Horn had appeared. He continued his report as he entered the fray and said that this monster could kill up to 30 million people and that all awakened ones must come to the battle. The awakened ones who found themselves in front of the monster were obliged to at least gain time to evacuate the residence. The leader and the rest of the awakened ones engaged in combat with the Red Horn using all the power they had. However, it seemed that against an enemy of this level, such power was not enough. A blonde named Nuri noticed that the mysterious stranger who had easily destroyed a level 4 enemy was leaving. She plucked up her courage and called after him, asking him to help her and her colleagues in the battle. However, the stranger only chuckled and said that he shouldn't do that at all, which made the girl's knees shake. Watching the rest of the awakened, the guy added that this was their world and they themselves must protect it. He asked to give him at least one reason why he needed to help them. And then he added that death is for the weak, life is for the strong, and there are no exceptions, because that is the law of power. The girl listened to him, watching as her colleagues died one after another at the clutches of the monster. The splashes of their blood remained in spots on her snow-white skin and light hair, until she herself could not believe what she heard. The guy looked back at her one last time and asked her to tell him where Black's office was. But Nuri only fell to her knees, exhausted, trembling with fear and despair. She could not utter a word. Serena ran up to the girl, while the stranger chuckled, called the girl useless, and continued on his way. Serena, supporting her friend, angrily shouted at the stranger, asking what he was looking for in such a situation, and tried to dissuade Nuri from making useless requests. But Nuri suddenly seemed to have gained courage and said loudly that this is not how the powers that be should behave. The girl summoned 2 huge swords and, pulling them out of the magical space, added that strong people. We must definitely help the defenseless. And after these words, with one jerk, the girl pulled out the swords. Seeing such a change in the timid young lady, the guy began to watch her with interest. Nuri jumped and used the cleavage skill with her huge swords. The monster reflected the awakened one's insignificant attack, and she was thrown aside. It seemed that the red dragon was about to swallow the man, opening its mouth wider. Nuri closed her eyes, realizing her insignificance and the proximity of the inevitable outcome. Suddenly, as if from another world, someone intervened and ordered the monster to lower its head, and it was pressed to the ground. The red dragon himself did not understand what was happening and what monstrous force was pressing him down. Serena and Leader Jack also didn't understand anything and watched everything in bewilderment. The princess, flying into the dragon's mouth, ended up in the arms of her savior, who called her an interesting person, carefully lowering himself to the ground with the girl in his arms. The stranger looked at her and said that he liked her. And then the guy added that his name was Wilhelm, and he was now her master, because as it turned out, Wilhelm was the Lord of Demons. Nuri was stunned by this turn of events and simply unable to say anything. She looked at her savior. She looked towards the monster behind Wilhelm as it began to move again. The huge red dragon collected the magical clot in its mouth and intended to attack the man. The girl was very scared, but Wilhelm was clearly not in the mood and looked angrily at the monster. Wilhelm counter-attacked the red dragon with one hand, sending a stream of incredible power towards it. Afterwards, the demon lord came closer to the dragon and said that he didn't like the monster's arrogant face. Wilhelm struck again and slammed the dragon into the ground, dealing the final damage to the monster. The awakened ones watching were surprised by the enormous power of the unknown guy in front of them. The demon lord looked at the lifeless body of the beaten monster and chuckled. Afterwards, he raised his hand, collecting the magical energy of the slain dragon in his palm. A mana crystal suddenly rose from the monster's body and headed towards Wilhelm. The hero looked at the stone that had fallen into his hands and thoughtfully said that this was the end of his business here. Leader Jack was very surprised when he saw the stone and thought that he had never seen such a big magic stone in his life. Wilhelm placed the stone in the portal of his magical space and approached Nuri. The girl trembled and stuttered as she asked what such a strong man wanted from her. Wilhelm told her to follow him, which surprised the girl even more. Nuri quickly pulled away and asked what he meant, but the demon lord was adamant and said he wouldn't repeat it twice. He ordered to follow him and said that the girl had no other choice, and the awakened one fell silent. Leader Jack intervened in the conversation and, covering the blonde with his body, tried to stop the unknown person. Jack thanked the stranger for helping him fight the monster, but added that he would not allow his people to be taken away. However, Wilhelm replied that he had not asked Jack's permission and that he could do whatever he wanted. The demon lord had a truly fiery temper and took Jack's behavior as disrespect. Using his strength, Wilhelm pressed on Jack and his assistant, and they writhed in sudden pain. Nuri came to the defense of her friends and, covering them with herself, told Wilhelm to stop and that she would go with him. The guy thought about the girl and realized that she was one of those people who love justice, and that was good. Also looking at Nuri's characteristics, he saw that the awakened one had a double rank, which was especially rare. This feature was like finding a precious stone among the boulders, and if trained, it would make a strong warrior. Wilhelm extended his hand, saying that he had chosen the girl, and she only looked at him in bewilderment with tears in her eyes. After a few moments of inaction, the hero asked to take his hand, and the girl agreed, extending hers. After the two held hands, a bright, scorching light began to envelop them, and Nuri became scared. However, Wilhelm reassured her that she had nothing to worry about and that it was a sealing ritual. This light swelled to such a size that it enveloped two people standing in the ruins and rose high into the sky. He could be seen even from several blocks away, where other awakened ones were watching him. Selena approached the corpse of the monster and, trying to put everything she saw together, asked herself one question about what happened. The bodies of the dead were already covered with tarpaulin, and the wounded were treated by doctors with magical skills. Selena, wearing a blanket, sat on one of the stone blocks and saw leader Max approaching her. The leader expressed his surprise at what had happened and the appearance of such a strong awakened one, and the girl added that she herself would not have believed it. Selena also mentioned that the stranger was looking for the Black Office, and the leader immediately screamed, asking why she didn't tell him about it earlier. Smiling sadly, the girl asked that now no one in the world could stop the new awakened one. Meanwhile, Wilhelm and his assistant Nuri were heading towards the Black's office. The gentleman asked how much longer they had to go, and the girl shuddered and replied that they had very little time left. She looked at her phone and thought about secretly sending her colleagues the geolocation. However, before she had time to do this, Wilhelm had already warned her out loud that she shouldn't do this. He said that since they were now sealed, he could now hear all her thoughts, and her colleagues were no longer bugs to him. Wilhelm added that from now on Nuri would not be able to escape, and now she belonged to him, which gave the girl goosebumps. After walking a little further, the gentleman told his subordinate to continue leading him to the appointed place, and the girl agreed. The two continued their journey along small streets, brightly lit by the sun. On one of the pillars hung a photograph of a young Wilhelm, in which he looked practically like a child. Noticing her, the hero remembered his grandmother and the hundreds of years he wandered in hell trying to find his way home. The gentleman was distracted from his thoughts by Nuri, who pointed forward, saying that they were already there. In front of them stood the ruins of the former Black Office, and the girl confirmed that they had arrived at the right place. What he saw horrified Wilhelm, causing his blood to boil. An armored SUV, in which the awakened had arrived earlier, was racing along the roads at full speed. Inside the SUV, Selina told her colleagues that she had conducted an investigation and found information on Wilhelm. The report had a photograph of a young Wilhelm and also matched the information with the given address, the Black Office. Selina added that he was an ordinary student and not even awakened, and his only family was his aunt, and the leader took away his tablet. Leader Max replied that he remembered the skirmish between the two guilds, Degas and Ilsam, near this office. The girl did not understand what the leader was getting at, but he claimed that if his guesses were correct, then everything was very serious. Leader Max's guesses were correct. In front of the ruins of the office, Wilhelm was filled with a dark aura of hatred. Through clenched teeth, he asked his assistant what had happened here, and from the tense atmosphere, she trembled. The girl opened her phone and said that there was a fight between the guilds. Even with the Bureau's intervention and restoration of order, several buildings still collapsed and many civilians died. Wilhelm's face reflected sorrow and sadness. He whispered the word grandmother, and memories from childhood about my aunt's care and her warm smile flashed through my head. The aunt worked a lot alone to raise and educate Wilhelm, and from early childhood, he helped as much as he could. And when I was studying at university, I was able to start providing for my aging grandmother. The hero looked at the debris and thought about his desire to move with his aunt to a bigger, newer house. Nuri, standing behind her master, felt all his grief and longing for his deceased relative. The dark aura was gaining strength and enveloping the hero in a thick fog, and he asked who exactly was involved in this destruction. Sadness and grief grew into uncontrollable anger and a thirst to kill. Wilhelm was ready to find everyone and everything. Suddenly, a man approached the hero with a request to stop, and the gentleman turned around. The leader Max approached him with Selina and introduced himself, saying that he was from the White Tiger unit of the National Intelligence Agency. Max bowed with the utmost respect and asked the hero to talk to him. Wilhelm replied that now was not the best time for conversations, and that those who valued their lives should leave. Leader Max reported that he was aware of the incident and that his unit was currently investigating. But the hero did not listen to him and simply began to leave, confusing the leader. When asked where he was heading, Wilhelm replied that he was going to the Alliance of the Awakened to resolve everything using his own methods. This statement shocked the leader, because he understood that such a person could very well start a war against the Alliance. Selina, without wasting any time, decided to report everything to her commander, because she, like no one else, saw Wilhelm's strength. Leader Max ordered his White Tiger unit to stop the hero. The three awakened ones, although unhappy that they would have to attack an unarmed man, still obeyed. One of them aimed stones at Wilhelm, confident that this attack would not kill him. However, not a single boulder reached its target and was smashed against an invisible barrier. The second one, awakened after this attack, noted that Wilhelm was strong, and there was no need to stand on ceremony with him. He leapt into attack with his huge axe and rushed towards the hero, confident in his strength. However, this attack did not even cause a scratch on the hero, considering that he barely moved from the spot. With one movement of his hand, Wilhelm threw the awakened man aside and sent him on his way. The hero was unperturbed, and the awakened one seemed not to understand anything, even when he found himself in flight. The magician who attacked first instinctively began to defend himself when the hero approached him. Selena and Max, who were watching this fight, were shocked, and the girl added that they were not able to stop this monster. All three of those awakened were lying on the ground in a terrible state, and some were even foaming at the mouth. However, the demon lord was so angry that it seemed like he was actually going to kill them. At the very last second, Nuri stopped him by grabbing his cloak and saying that this couldn't be done. Wilhelm turned to her, asking how a servant subordinate to his will dare to stop him. However, it seemed that the girl was no longer afraid of him, but was crying for a completely different reason. Nuri replied that there are many good people in the Alliance who do their job to protect the weak. The girl burst into tears even more, saying that her heart was breaking with sympathy, and she was overwhelmed with sadness and mental pain. Wilhelm was surprised at how quickly she learned to recognize his emotions, because not much time had passed since the seal. He recalled that he wanted to return to this world for the sake of his aunt, who took care of him no matter what. The memory of the ideals of his only family tempered Wilhelm's anger. Suddenly, the master's hand ended up on the head of his subordinate, which at first greatly surprised the girl. Wilhelm stroked Nuri's head and thanked her for her support, saying that he remembered. I remembered that I returned to the world of people in order to be with my loved ones and family. The hero said that now he wants to protect weak people, just like his aunt told him. Hearing this, the girl was sincerely happy for her master, and his words warmed her soul. But Wilhelm also added that if she had not been able to press on his pity, she would have already died from his sword. The hero turned to the leader and Selena, saying that since they were now under his power, he would not join the alliance. Having heard from Wilhelm that he agreed to work with them under one condition, the leader decided to agree. Wilhelm ordered that his aunt's killers be found and gave White Tiger 3 days to do so. There was a buzz at the National Intelligence Agency from early morning. The man in glasses ran with his subordinates to meet Leader Max. He lamented why the leader had not immediately reported that the situation with the monster had been resolved. Max bowed in apology and said that he had resolved the consequences after the incident. The boss noticed the guy behind Max while he was saying that he would prepare a detailed report tomorrow. The chief asked who this man was and whether he was awakened. After he was told that he was a new awakened one, the chief asked if he was registered, and he suggested that they take the test and fill out the paperwork, which spoiled both Max and Selena's mood. Wilhelm himself was surprised, asking why they were going to test him. Selena accompanied the hero to the testing site and, pointing to the crowd of people, added that this was all a cue. Wilhelm asked if he really had to wait that long until it was his turn. Selena stuttered and replied that she would try to resolve the situation, since the hero's behavior was unpredictable. They approached the man from the administration, and Selena introduced herself to him, reporting where she came from. The man replied that he had been warned about a man named Wilhelm who was due to undergo testing. However, pointing to the crowd behind him, he added that they would still have to go through in order of the queue. He added that he would only have to wait a few hours, and that he could not let anyone in who was not on the list through. Wilhelm was already on the edge. He asked how they dared stop him because of such weak people. Nuri, seeing the aura around her master, mentally begged him not to kill anyone. Wilhelm continued on his way forward despite the words of the people standing in front of him. And in just a moment, almost everyone in the room was unconscious and lying on the floor. Having seen and felt such power, the man from the administration was in shock. Wilhelm told him that it was a waste of time to evaluate such weaklings and let them test him. The injured people were brought to their senses and carried out of the waiting room on stretchers. To the chief's lamentations that every awakened person was worth their weight in gold, Nuri added that they were lucky. After all, the gentleman was extremely lenient and did not kill anyone, and Max and Selina confirmed this fact with their silence. Max approached his boss and said that he better get ready, which surprised him. Wilhelm had already entered the testing room, and the operator asked him via radio to pay attention to the ball. It was a measuring sphere, and since Wilhelm was a magician, he needed to launch the strongest magical attack on the sphere. The hero understood that his strongest blow could blow the entire building to pieces, and so he decided to strike with such force that nothing around would be destroyed. However, after the spell, absolutely nothing happened, which greatly surprised the hero. The operator said that everything was fine and asked Wilhelm not to be nervous. After thinking for a moment more, Wilhelm estimated how much force he would need for this ball. He extended his hand forward, and an energy wave was sent towards the measuring sphere. Wilhelm cast the spell with a completely calm face and commanded the sphere to explode. And after that, the measuring sphere exploded into many small fragments that scattered around. The girl operator was very surprised by this, because the strongest awakened one could only split him in two. She thanked the hero and said that they could move on to other more detailed tests. However, Wilhelm was against it, saying that no device in this institution could withstand its power. Looking menacingly at the camera, he added that he did not intend to stay here any longer, and that it would be better for them to bring him the results already. The operator and researchers set to work, and after some time, the results were ready. They provided the information to the boss, and what they saw made the man break out in a cold sweat. Now, in the database, next to Wilhelm's new photograph, the highest awarded rank, S, was displayed. The gentleman and his subordinate were sitting in a cafe over drinks, discussing how Wilhelm passed the test and whether he was interested. While drinking hot green tea, the hero wondered whether green tea had always been so bitter. As if sensing something was wrong, Muri offered him her drink, saying that she could order another. Wilhelm tasted the sweet, cold liquid and realized that he liked this taste much better. Muri asked what type Wilhelm was and guessed that he was the type who enhanced his body's abilities for combat. The gentleman replied that he would most likely be attributed a magical type, and a silent question froze on the girl's face. The hero explained that he had never used his real power here, and even during testing, he only used a spell to strengthen his body. He was lost in his thoughts, thinking that some abilities of the demonic world could not be used here. His answer surprised Nuri, because she could not even imagine how strong Wilhelm was. She introduced him as a magician, saying that she understood everything, and the hero asked her not to think about nonsense, because he sees it too. Wilhelm thought that everything would be easier if he could summon his castle. But then everything in the area would be crushed into a pancake. The couple was interrupted from their pleasant conversation by the boss's voice, and both turned away. The chief, accompanied by Selina and Max, ran to them and said that the test results were ready, as a result of which Wilhelm was awarded the highest rank. Nuri was the happiest of all, saying that this was very good news. However, Wilhelm immediately said that he knew about his strength and asked what the leader wanted from him. The boss didn't waste much time lying and said that he would explain everything and suggested that Wilhelm officially announce his status. However, the hero immediately refused and was adamant in his decision, which greatly surprised everyone. Selina told him that this was a very big opportunity that would bring him fame and money. But Wilhelm didn't even bat an eyelid, replying that if he needed money, he would earn it himself. The hero moderated the ardor of the people surrounding him by saying that he had already agreed to help them, and they should be grateful for it. He also added that the White Tiger unit, in turn, must fulfill its part of the deal. These words made Max's face twist. He had to find the criminal guilty of Aunt Wilhelm's death as quickly as possible. Behind the large chair, with his feet up on the table, the man Max was suspicious of was laughing. A black car with tinted windows was driving along the city highways in an unknown direction. Inside were Nuri and Wilhelm, who had been sent by management to a place where they could stay. The car stopped in front of the house and dropped off the passengers who were supposed to live there. At this time, the chief was thinking that the country could boast that it had an awakened being of such rank. Selina noted that such news could shake the global balance of power in the world. The chief responded to this by saying that if political games were put aside, this news would allow ordinary citizens to feel safe. Nuri and Wilhelm were already approaching the gates of their new habitat, prepared by the authorities. It was a beautiful and large house with a small swimming pool and a garden around it. The girl's eyes lit up with admiration because she had never seen such big houses in her life. Wilhelm added that it couldn't compare to his castle, but he liked it here too. 3 days later, Leader Max arrived at the house holding a thick folder of documents. He approached the gate and announced that he had come to Wilhelm on behalf of his superiors. Having already passed the gate, Max heard loud sounds, similar to the sounds of a duel. He quietly approached the place where the sound was coming from and opened the door slightly to see what was going on. And I saw Nuri catching his breath in front of his master, and the entire training hall was in cracks. Wilhelm told his subordinate not to relax, but to attack with all her might, and she obediently followed the order and rushed at the master using her 2 swords. It seemed like they were fighting each other, but Wilhelm repelled each of the girl's attacks with his own hands. Nuri attacked her master in a jump, holding her swords in front of her. But this attack was also stopped. The girl noticed that the gentleman stopped her blades with just his fingers and was surprised. Also, simply by flicking his finger on the blade, Wilhelm sent his subordinate flying. As soon as she landed and came to her senses, he said that they were taking a break, and the girl agreed, watching her from the side. Wilhelm thought that the girl should quickly become stronger in order to be called his minion. Max was still at the door and heard Nuri ask the owner that today was the last day of the deadline. She asked if Wilhelm was really going to kill everyone involved in this matter. The owner looked at him with angry eyes and said that he had given him enough time and there was no need to expect mercy. The girl became upset, saying that the lives of these people are also important, after which she lowered her head to the ground. Wilhelm asked again if they were really important and thought to himself that he had not heard such words for several centuries. He recalled his survival in the demon realm, where any life was worth practically nothing, and only the strongest survived. The hero put his hand on the girl's shoulder and said that this would not be a thoughtless murder. It would be revenge for the death of his aunt, and a measure to prevent something like this in the future. Because when one soul dies, another survives. Nuri said that she understood, and her master thought that in the human world, he had become more lenient in explaining such things to his comrades. The door suddenly swung open and Max walked in, unable to listen to this conversation any longer. Max showed the document and asked to give him some time. He brought the necessary information. Wilhelm replied that he could have called, but the leader said that he wanted to meet in person. And noticing Nuri out of the corner of his eye, Leiter realized that she had changed a lot while being next to this man. The hero said that he doesn't like to waste time, and the leader, taken aback, asked for forgiveness. Max handed over the document and said that here were the results of the investigation they had conducted. Wilhelm opened the document, and the instigators turned out to be members of the Ilsum Guild. The Ilsum Guild was a group of awakened members of the Ilsimwi gang, and their leader was a man named Danny. This guild was reluctant to participate in battles with monsters, but constantly tormented ordinary citizens by terrorizing the city with crimes. Since they are connected to the Awakened Association, the unit cannot do anything to them, and their actions go unpunished. Wilhelm closed the folder and said that the unit was now in good luck. The hero left saying that he would deal with such trash himself, and the leader wouldn't even have to get his hands dirty this time. At the same time, the leader of the gang, Ilsum, told his subordinates that they had captured a shopping center and that they would soon be able to earn a lot of money. Smiling vilely, he thanked the association and the national defense, which was untying their hands more and more. The man's joyful jubilation was interrupted by explosions behind him. The guild headquarters was under attack. He fell and hid behind his bodyguards, asking who dared to do such a bold act. The guild members ran out into the street in search of the disturber of their peace and saw something strange. A cloud of dark aura gathered above the guild building, from which someone said that they must atone for their sins. The leader, who followed his subordinates out, asked in bewilderment what had happened. The subordinates told their leader that someone was descending from the dark cloud, and everyone paid attention to it. The one who appeared was Wilhelm, who asked if the people in front of him were awakened from the Ilsum Guild. Wilhelm's eyes were filled with a thirst for revenge, and he ordered them to confess their sins so that they could die painlessly. Leader Danny and his henchmen were surprised by such a statement and clearly had no intention of repenting of their sins. The leader pointed at Wilhelm and ordered his men to kill the stranger who dared to attack their building. Wilhelm came down to earth and said that he was giving them one last chance to admit their crimes, adding that he no longer intends to pity such vile and base people as they. One of the gang members got scared and was shaking, asking what was wrong with this guy. He turned around and ran away, saying that he didn't want to take part in this. His comrades shouted at him that he was a coward. However, Wilhelm said that he had not given anyone permission to escape and that they would not be able to do so. He swung and threw a metal beam after the fleeing guy. The attack succeeded, killing the fleeing man instantly and sending his blood straight onto their leader. Wilhelm went to the remaining people, saying that he offered to die painlessly. However, none of them will receive pity or forgiveness, and none of them will even be able to escape. The leader began to feel sick. He shook, retreated, and tried to scream, but fear grabbed him by the throat. Danny turned and ran away, leaving his comrades to be devoured. Watching as his henchmen tried to hide in the building, Wilhelm was having fun. Flames flared up around him, and he thought that this world was no different from the demon kingdom. Having made their way into the building, the first thing they did was to lower the armor-piercing curtains. Danny wondered what the reason was and why this man attacked them, and an incident came to mind when his men destroyed a residential area. The man next to him asked how many people they had in the guild and said that he had called the entire guild to defend them. The thugs arrived any minute, and each of them was considered a valuable awakened one. They blocked the entrance to the building and stood in front of Wilhelm in a crowd, waving their weapons. The next second, the entire crowd attacked the intruder at once, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. Wilhelm repelled the first volley of the attack with one blow and continued on his way to revenge. The screams of the guild members reached the office, where the guild leader was hiding with his henchmen. They nervously turned towards the door, realizing that the screams had died down and there was silence. The armored door exploded at the same second and flew into pieces, blazing with fire. From this flame, Wilhelm appeared, asking why the rats always hide. The remaining two were in shock and did not believe that the hero alone dealt with all the awakened ones. The guildmaster's henchmen started banging on the windows to be let go and shouted that he didn't want to die. Wilhelm's shadow appeared behind him, and he asked why the one who killed innocents was so afraid of his own death. After this, the hero hit the henchman's head against the wall, so hard that the wall cracked. The guild leader was trembling and already wet from fear, asking why this stranger was doing this to them. The hero calmly replied that he was going to wipe the Ilsum Guild off the face of the earth. And then he asked Danny if he could name at least one reason why he should stay alive. The leader began to dodge and say that they were simply defending themselves that time and had no other choice. Wilhelm immediately cut off his story, saying that it was a lie, that the Ilsum Guild was the first to attack a defenseless and weak guild. Danny realized that Wilhelm already knew the whole truth and was simply testing him. The guildmaster pulled on his gloves and his weapon and decided that he would not wait for death and grovel. He shouted that he was not going to tolerate such an upstart and attacked first, stretching out his hands. Danny hit Wilhelm, but there was not a scratch on him, and the hero smiled and said that he would give him a minute and he could try again. The guild leader fought with all his might, trying not to miss his chance and save his life. This whole minute, the hero thought about how such an insignificant weakling had taken away the person closest to him. Danny swung, but didn't notice that his right arm had already been torn from his body. In a matter of seconds, Danny also lost his legs and kept saying that time was not up yet. He cried, stretching his only hand forward, and behind him the demon lord was seething with anger. Wilhelm listened silently as the guildmaster asked for mercy and promised mountains of gold. Danny grabbed the door in horror, trying to survive and escape from this monster. But fate had other plans. A little later, the place was already cordoned off by police and an intelligence center. Wiping his sweat with a handkerchief, the boss thought that the new guy really didn't spare anyone. Wilhelm was leaving the building, and the chief already had a premonition that the Alliance of the Awakened would not remain on the sidelines. At the Alliance meeting, they were already discussing how to punish the only Awakens class for such a massacre, and opinions were divided into two camps. The chief was surrounded by disgruntled council members and did not know what to do with himself from anxiety. However, the hum of arguments was interrupted by the head, who said that they had more important problems, since the opening of unknown gates had become more frequent. And besides, all the monsters were level 4 and above, and the number of dead citizens broke all records. The head noted that the Awakened in Korea are not up to the task, so they should be glad that they have a strong ally like Wilhelm. However, this did not mean that Wilhelm was allowed to do everything, and therefore a decision was made to have the highest authorities intervene. The head reported that Wilhelm would now be closely watched, and the chief was horrified by the very thought that he would have to report this. Noticing that the head of the unit was very nervous, the head reprimanded him, and he apologized. While the council was deciding how to manage such limitless power, Wilhelm was taking a shower after his revenge. While serving her master, Nuri also took care of his clothes. Opening the closet with prepared clothes, the girl saw absolutely identical shirts. Nuri was horrified by the fact that they were all absolutely identical and completely tasteless. Taking one set of clothes, the maid went to her master's bathroom. However, when I went in there, I saw that Wilhelm was standing there without clothes, and I was shocked, to put it mildly. She blushed deeply and asked why he was standing there without clothes. But Wilhelm remained just as unperturbed. Having thrust a set of clothes into the gentleman's hands, Nuri ran out of the bathroom. Watching her, Wilhelm got dressed and thought that he had taken a very stupid girl. The master and his maid spent their free time in the fresh air. Nuri was worried about her master because he had not said anything for several days and was devastated after the revenge. She also recalled how the boss asked her on his knees to calm his master down. A brilliant idea struck the girl, and she leaned over and suggested to the owner that they go shopping. Wilhelm asked again, and after hearing that they needed to buy new clothes, he agreed that it was a good idea. Nuri blushed at this change of mood. It seemed that now she cared about nothing except Wilhelm's peace of mind. The girl happily said that she would go get ready, and the owner added that there was one thing. The maid was frightened and thought that the owner did not consider her worthy of going with him, or that he did not like shopping. But the reason turned out to be quite trivial. Wilhelm had no money. The girl said that the owner could borrow money until he was paid by the service. But the Lord replied that the demon lord had no need to borrow money and took out a huge crystal. He took the stone in his hand and said that if he sold it, there would be more than enough money. The heroes went to the city, and Nuri, showed them the exchange office, which is run by the National Intelligence Agency. Here, people exchanged valuables obtained from monsters for money and were supposed to be helped. A girl met them behind the counter and asked what kind of precious stone the guests wanted to sell. She asked to see the property for sale so that an appraisal could be made. The first time she saw a stone of such size, the girl froze and then called her boss. She informed her superiors that people had come to sell an unusual, large nugget. After some time, Nuri and Wilhelm were already sitting in the general manager's office. He looked at his guests haughtily and wondered why a girl from intelligence had come to see him. Looking at Wilhelm, the manager decided that he was some kind of beggar and did not understand why they were wasting his time. The hero threw his nugget on the manager's table, and the manager's face immediately distorted. He was shocked, because he had never seen such nuggets and could not determine the level. When asked how much it cost, the manager replied that there was no money on the exchange for such a large stone yet, and that it was worth contacting the central bank. And after these words, Wilhelm broke the stone into small pieces, not wanting to bother with this matter any longer. A smaller stone fell into the hands of the stunned manager, and Wilhelm asked if he could pay for at least that much. The manager said that they could buy one, but he needed to negotiate the amount with his superiors and Wilhelm would have to wait. Wilhelm replied that he had been told that it was the largest exchange in the country, and he was disappointed that they could not buy a single stone. Nuri intervened in the conversation, saying that they needed the money right now, and couldn't they pay at least half? The manager refused, but Nuri pressured him by saying that they could sell the stone for a much smaller amount. Nuri offered 1 billion to sell, which really offended the manager, and he was angry that she offered a deal to the detriment of the planning bureau. Behind the girl's sincere desire, there was a demon who kept saying that if she refused, she could die. The manager had no chance against these two, and he agreed to this amount. The guys left the stock exchange building and went to have fun shopping. Wilhelm praised Nuri for making the deal and not wasting time, and the girl suggested buying him clothes first. In the room, the manager was left alone with his wounded ego and thought about how people like them could humiliate him. Wanting to show the real power of money, he dialed some number on his phone. Our heroes had a great time at the mall, not expecting any troubles. And high in the sky, small glimpses of a new portal were already breaking through, which no one had suspected. Nuri pointed towards one of the shops and asked her owner to come with her. Wilhelm replied that she could buy herself whatever she wanted, but he didn't really need anything. But the girl insisted, saying that they came here for him and must definitely replenish his wardrobe. The maid grabbed the owner by the hand and said that he must definitely dress nicely. A memory of the demon world and his servants remaining there flashed through Wilhelm's mind, and he thought that Nuri was surprising him more and more. He smiled, thinking about what an unusual and interesting girl was leading him by the hand now. At the clothing store, they were met by a salesperson who greeted the customers with a polite bow. He asked if he could show them something, and the girl asked him to pick out a costume for her master. The store workers got down to their work, starting with trying on clothes and taking measurements. Some time later, Wilhelm was truly unrecognizable in his fancy suit. The hero asked his maid what she thought, but she just looked at him with wide eyes. And only after a few moments Nuri was able to add that the owner looked simply magnificent. Wilhelm asked again, and the girl cried out in admiration that she had never seen such handsome guys in her life. Listening to such sincere praise, the hero looked thoughtfully at his servant. Wilhelm said that they were finished here, and he did not need a mirror, because his maid said that he was magnificent, and that was enough for him. Next they went to buy clothes for Nuri, and at times the owner's choice was extravagant, and the amount of sweet coffee they drank increased each time, crossing all boundaries of reason. They had a good time. Suddenly, the building began to shake and Wilhelm and Nuri heard noise coming from outside. When they went outside, the heroes saw a new portal that was about to open and release unknown monsters. Nuri asked her master, and he confirmed that these were unknown gates, and that he had never seen such gates. A huge paw of a monster crawled out of the gate, and Nuri thought that it was strange because they opened without any prior signs. The girl froze in place, repeating what the owner told her about the unknown gate. When an unknown gate appears, it means catastrophic consequences and many high-level monsters. Wilhelm said that judging by the look, what will come out of these gates will be many times stronger than the monsters that humanity has seen. The townspeople looked in horror at the mesmerizing picture in the sky, anticipating imminent destruction and chaos. Two paws of an unknown monster had already emerged from the gates, threatening to hang over the city. Nuri immediately reported to the center that an unknown gate had opened and help was urgently needed. However, the half-emerged red monster roared throughout the area, announcing its appearance. The deafening roar made the earth shake. Buildings began to collapse and people covered their ears with their hands. Nuri continued to report the situation to headquarters and request people to help. The townspeople scattered and ran away, trying to save their lives from the clutches of the monster. On the phone, Nuri was asked to repeat what she had said, but her gaze, awakened, caught on a little girl who was crying in the crowd. The girl was left completely alone watching this. The girl could not move from fear. Nuri was brought back to his senses by a voice from the telephone, which had been trying to get through to him from the other end of the line the whole time. The girl looked up and said that she was in a shopping center, and then an unknown gate opened from which a monster came out. Nuri looked at her master and saw a smile on his face, and being sealed, she could feel the joyful excitement that her master was experiencing. She called out to him, saying that she was going to evacuate civilians, but Wilhelm did not respond to her. The hero realized that a dragon was coming out of the gate and remembered them from the demon world. They were some of the most powerful creatures. Wilhelm began to emit a huge amount of mana, rejoicing that a worthy opponent would now appear. After all, dragons have always been greedy and crazy demigods who did not want to submit to anyone. The hero trembled at the thought that he would now be able to have some great fun with such an opponent. However, hearing Nuri already shouting his name, he quickly came to his senses. The maid cried and asked her master to save the people and help her protect them. What he heard shocked Wilhelm, and he was angry and annoyed by such behavior. He turned around and saw a crowd of weak and worthless people who were running for their lives. Wilhelm understood that this world was too weak, and no one could resist it. Neither monsters nor people, and the hero considered the world too fragile for him whose power is blind. The world seemed to him like a sand castle swarming with ants in the shape of people. The hero said that in the demon kingdom, the strongest always survived, and he was uncomfortable when his power was suppressed. He shouted that he had had enough, because in front of him was the strongest opponent in recent years. However, Nuri screamed again, and the hero stopped in confusion, unable to do anything. The debris of the buildings began to collapse, and the girl said that she wanted to save these people. She drew her swords in hopes of breaking the boulders before any victims could appear, and she single-handedly began to break apart the large boulders that continued to fall down. But she didn't have time to break them all, and the little girl and her mother found themselves in danger. This time, the demon lord extended his hand forward, but not with the intention of killing anyone. And with the aim of saving, he broke the stone, which could easily take several weak lives. The owner smiled and told Nuri to evacuate the city's residents and not to worry about anything. He soared into the sky and said that from now on, he didn't give a damn about anyone, including his subordinates. And disappearing into the lilac light, he added that he didn't want to be a bad gentleman. Nuri thanked him and ran away with her lips pursed. A terrible unknown lay ahead. She burst into tears of gratitude to her master, and her cheeks turned pink. The girl shouted loudly to people to run in the right direction. Wilhelm thought that for the sake of his subordinate, the fight could be postponed for a couple of seconds. Wilhelm developed wings on his back and legs like an archangel and went into battle. The dragon had already appeared halfway and could not get out of the gate. It seemed like he was stuck. The hero flew up to him, said that he would help, grabbed his nose and looked straight into the monster's eyes. And then he threw it into the sky at full speed, as far as he could. After saying that nothing would interfere with their fight up there, the demon lord, with a smile on his face, went after his victim. There were civilians and Nuri left on the ground who watched this exciting picture. The dragon turned out to be of impressive size and, finding itself in orbit around the earth, looked around. Wilhelm stood in front of him and asked if the demigod had woken up after such a flight. The hero smiled and informed the dragon that they were free to act here, so he could attack. I looked at the information about the dragon and realized that he was banished for violating a contract with someone. The dragon roared, and the bright light of its breath was directed at Wilhelm, who stood guard over the piece. Wilhelm stretched his hand out in front of him, knowing that if the dragon's breath reached the ground, they would be finished. After some time, the dragon finished spewing out flames of bright light, and I saw that the demon lord had prevented everything and remained completely intact. Wilhelm looked at the dragon and said that he had just bought this suit, and he had already ruined it. Full of rage, the demon lord went into battle with all his desire to destroy his opponent. He hit him in the neck several times and threw him far forward into open space. The dragon landed on the satellite's blade, and after this reconnaissance, Wilhelm realized that the dragon possessed magic and was protected by a barrier. The hero opened a magic portal and decided to use one thing in his arsenal, or rather a sword forged from the spine of another dragon. In the heat of the fierce battle, Wilhelm managed to thrust his sword and pierce the dragon's scales. He continued to attack the monster with the weapon sticking out of it, and eventually threw it back even further. Unsuspecting its workers noticed through the porthole an unknown monster body approaching them. And the dragon, having come to his senses, was able to grab the spaceship with his claws. Wilhelm flew up to his opponent and said that he was strong enough, and they continued the fight. Meanwhile, on the ground, the team of those awakened from the bureau had already arrived and evacuated the residence. Nuri, lifting blocks of concrete, recalled training with her master at home. Medics treated wounded people who remained under the rubble. Leader Jack looked out into the sky for the gates and saw that their reactivity was becoming less, meaning they were closing. After some time, the gates were indeed closed. The consequences were eliminated, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Jack turned to Nuri, asking him to tell him where Wilhelm and the monster had gone. The girl hesitated for a second, and then replied that they were up there and most likely fighting there. Jack asked again if Nuri meant that they rose high into the sky, and the girl nodded. The leader scratched his head and said that he didn't expect that. But if it's what he thinks, then everything should be fine. One of the summoned Awakened Alliance began to protest that the huge monster couldn't just disappear like that. He shouted at Nuri, calling her crazy and demanding that she tell the truth. Jack came to the defense of his subordinate, and a verbal altercation ensued between the representatives of the Alliance and the Bureau. The Awakened One shouted that the Alliance does not exist to sort out the mess created by the Bureau. Leader Max came up and said that the Awakened One, whoever he was in the Alliance, had no right to talk like that to the Bureau members. However, the Awakened One did not calm down and continued to insult the leaders. He pointed out that he occupies a high position and is not obliged to be here and work for the state. Only Nuri, looking up, noticed a strange movement in the sky. Like meteorites, unknown bodies were heading towards the Earth at full speed. People started screaming that they were about to fall towards them, and that everyone needed to run for cover. The bodies landed on the ground, and there was a small pogrom, but people managed to escape. Looking closely, Nuri saw her master and was very happy about his appearance. Wilhelm stood on the dragon's head in the fire, holding his hands in his pockets, and descended to the ground. The awakened one from the Alliance tried to understand what was happening and grinned, seeing how all the servicemen were rejoicing. Nuri ran up to the owner, and the man from the Alliance, looking closely, realized that he had never seen such huge monsters. Leader Max came closer and bowed, saying that Wilhelm had done an excellent job with the monster. But there was one thing. He called a small assistant and said that he had a very important conversation with the hero. The assistant's name was Uriel, and Max ordered her to make sure that no one could hear their conversation. Looking at Uriel, Wilhelm thought that summoning a creature from a fantasy world was quite an impressive skill. Max began his report and said that the method that Wilhelm had chosen had greatly complicated their situation. The hero asked what the leader meant, but when he turned around, he saw the monster's head and understood everything himself. Max reported that now everyone knows how strong Mr. Wilhelm is. He single-handedly killed a level 7 monster, whose appearance the whole country knows about, and soon this news will spread throughout the world. Wilhelm asked to get straight to the point, because he hated useless chatter more than rudeness. Leader Max said that they were now forced to officially declare Wilhelm's existence. A crowd of people had already gathered behind the barrier, taking pictures of Wilhelm and gossiping about how he alone had dealt with the monster. Leader Max was already prepared to accept the refusal and was looking for ways to solve the new headache in advance. However, Wilhelm agreed, and the leader was simply shocked, which was reflected on his face. The hero said that they can do what they have to do, and since it turned out that way, he agrees. Leader Max asked again if the gentleman was sure, but he asked not to make him repeat himself. And still stretching out his hand, the hero added that he didn't need any extra problems at all. And pulling the stone out of the dragon's head with energy, Wilhelm broke the barrier. He pulled out a huge stone and said that he hoped they would find such a reward acceptable. On the other side of the world, a soldier contacted Mr. Anderson to inform him that the operation in Seoul had been cancelled. Anderson asked why, to which the soldier replied that the level 7 monster had already been eliminated, and the one who eliminated him turned out to be a new Awakens class from Korea. When people see something completely incomprehensible to themselves, they usually react in two ways: either accept what they saw or completely deny it. The one awakened from the Alliance also loudly shouted that it was a stage show, and that such things do not happen in reality. Like a madman, he continued to talk about how all of this was most likely a clever projection. Leader Max, concerned about the behavior of the awakened one, asked to calm down and listen to them. However, he did not believe that Wilhelm was an Awakens class, nor that the monster was level 7. He shouted that the whole thing was staged from start to finish by the National Intelligence Agency with the desire to intimidate the Alliance. Leader Max and the madmen from the Alliance were almost coming to blows, arguing and proving their case. Suddenly Nuri screamed that her master was a Reals class and that they should stop bickering. The girl added that if it weren't for her master, all the people behind her would be dead, and Seoul would be wiped off the face of the earth. The awakened one from the Alliance switched to the girl, pointing out that people of a lower level cannot interfere in the conversations of those who are higher up. Wilhelm stood up in defense of his subordinate, saying that he did not want to waste his time on such loud weaklings. He came closer and, looking into the eyes of the awakened one, used his power on him, saying that he had crossed the line in relation to Nuri. Wilhelm added that he was now only issuing a warning so that he would not insult him or his subordinates. In Wilhelm's eyes, the awakened one saw himself being torn apart by monsters. This image made his legs give way and he fell. and the demon lord returned to his subordinates. Wilhelm continued on his way and ordered the girl to follow him, and she obeyed. On TV, they showed a press conference where they talked about the awakening of the first S-rank person named Wilhelm. In front of the TV on the sofa sat the gentleman with the maid and the leader Max, who noted that Wilhelm's existence was now common knowledge. In response to the attack, that the hero wanted to avoid problems. Max responded that problems cannot be avoided no matter what you do. However, he assured that for now no one will touch Wilhelm, because he is the strongest resident of Korea and possibly the whole world. Max also had concerns that other countries had not made any statements. Before this, South Korea was pushed around by large countries where a lot of power was concentrated. But now the situation may change. Nuri listened to the story of the political wars surrounding the Awakened and was proud of her master. Max was sure that the silence would not last long and that the superpowers would soon do something. He told Wilhelm that they needed allies, and the hero was just about to be met by the Awakened Wolf Special Squad from the USA. However, Wilhelm immediately refused, saying that he was not interested in political games. He said he was very annoyed that everything he had bought in the stores that day had been destroyed. Max was upset, and Nuri, watching her master, thought about how to resolve this situation. Remembering the interests of the owner, Nuri deliberately asked the leader if the strongest among the Awakened Anderson was in this squad. Understanding what the girl was getting at, Max agreed and added that if the invitation had been accepted by Wilhelm, then he would be able to communicate with the most powerful Awakened in the world, Anderson. Max also added that it was Anderson who initiated the request for a meeting with Wilhelm. After hearing all this, the Demon Lord became interested and agreed to meet with them. On a clear sunny day, a white private jet arrived, and the stairs for passengers were lowered. The US military got off the plane and smiled broadly, saying that they had been well received. The golden-haired soldier reminded his friends that they had arrived on the territory of an ally country and that they could not cause trouble. He also added that we must not forget about the tasks set by the Pentagon and that we need to complete the mission, after which we can do whatever we want here. The three sat on a small sofa and discussed two missions assigned by the Pentagon. The first, recruitment of a new Awakened, and the second was to test his strength through a battle between Anderson and a newcomer. The soldier added that he would handle the rest himself. So the main thing for Anderson was to do his part. The blonde Awakened one also added that if the newcomer refuses to be recruited, he is finished. Wilhelm waited for the special squad at the Awakened headquarters, looking through information about Anderson. And finally, his subordinate informed him that the guests had already arrived and were ready to meet. Nuri was happy that she would meet her former idol, because her current idol is her master. Wilhelm recalled how he underwent an operation to modify his body using genosis in the demon kingdom. So he was not a pure-blooded human, and in the demon realm, he did not meet any pure-blooded humans. The hero patted the head of the maid who walked him to the door and thought about how curious he was about how strong pure-blooded people were. Entering the room, he saw a special squad and the most powerful Awakened in the world. They met Anderson's eyes, and even without meeting, they knew they were both eager to engage in battle. The Director of National Intelligence approached the guests and extended his hand to Wilhelm. The outstretched hand remained hanging in the air, while the director spoke about how he had long wanted to meet Wilhelm. Nuri apologized to her superiors for her master's behavior, and the director said that everything was fine. The director introduced the three soldiers, realizing that Wilhelm was currently interested in none other than Anderson. Jensen was the first to approach and introduce himself in Korean, saying that he was an Awakened rank, and Nuri was surprised by his level of language proficiency. However, from the outside, it seemed that Wilhelm didn't care about the greeting of the guest from America, and he kept staring at Anderson. In fact, Wilhelm was immersed in looking through the information on the strongest awakened and realized that he could slay the dragon. However, his thoughts were interrupted by a third guy from the team named Mike. He grabbed Wilhelm's hand and said that it was customary to shake hands as a sign of respect. The hero responded to the offer and squeezed Mike's hand a little harder, causing him to scream in pain. And then he tried to attack with magic, but Wilhelm did not let him cast any spell. Everyone was surprised, including the remaining members of the special unit. Nuri covered the director with her body so that nothing would fly at him in case of danger. The next second, the demon lord was already swinging his attack, and Mike didn't have time to do anything. Wilhelm's blow sent out a wave that caused gusts of wind inside the office. The strongest awakened one came out to protect his subordinate and drew his sword. He apologized for his comrade's rudeness, but also noted that Wilhelm's actions were also wrong. The hero agreed, and Mike fell to his knees from the stress and fear he had experienced. Nuri informed the guests that they had a doctor and that she would accompany them to the right room. Putting his sword back into the magical space, Anderson apologized for his comrade. Wilhelm said that he did not want to waste time, and if they had business with him, then they should speak quickly. Anderson agreed and immediately offered the hero to join the U.S. Army on favorable terms. Upon hearing the proposal, the director immediately began to be indignant that the United States wanted to steal the awakened one, and Wilhelm immediately refused. The hero was already burning with desire to fight and told Anderson not to fool him, because he also wanted to fight him. Meanwhile, in the medical office, Mike, having received treatment, complained to his friend and blamed him for everything. Mike was angry at Wilhelm and said that he didn't respect anyone and that such behavior towards the strongest was unacceptable. While Nuri was listening to loud and harsh statements addressed to her master, the medic hurried away. Jensen replied to Mike that such behavior was entirely expected and looked down at his comrade. He added that Wilhelm is one of the strongest, and for a powerful person, arrogance is understandable. The soldier asked Mike not to be mistaken, and that their team was strong only because of Anderson. After all, Mike is lucky to be on this team only because of his strong skill. But he shouldn't forget where his place is. Mike stood up abruptly and shouted that he already knew all this, but he would never acknowledge the strength of this newcomer. The squabble continued for some time, and Mike complained that they had to endure such treatment. Nuri intervened in the conversation, saying that the soldiers got off easy, and if her master had wanted, he could have killed them all. After hearing this, the soldiers forgot about their argument and began to laugh at the girl. Mike approached Nuri and said that she didn't understand anything, but she only added that her master was the strongest man in the world. These words almost made Mike and Jensen roll with laughter when they learned that she called him master and added that her master would soon die. In a special room, the strongest awakened ones were already preparing for battle. The director, watching the indicators, hoped that the two strongest would not destroy the building. Anderson had a sword mastery of level 8 and Wilhelm was thinking about which sword to choose. After some time, the hero pulled out the necessary sword, Thunderblade, from the magical space. Anderson noted that it was very kind of Wilhelm to think so highly of his abilities. The hero replied that he was a magician. But Anderson didn't have to worry, and today Wilhelm would fight only with swords. The strongest of America attacked first, but his Excalibur did not reach its target. Wilhelm deftly dodged the attack and, hanging in the air, said that it was very good. Anderson was amazed that he was unable to leave a single scratch on his opponent's body, and he went on the offensive, wanting to wipe the grin off Wilhelm's face. Korea's strongest attacked next and sent Anderson flying. The awakened one hit the wall hard and was shocked by the force of the attack. Our hero, on the contrary, wanted Anderson to survive and get back on his feet, because he didn't want everything to end so quickly. Anderson, having come to his senses, thought that his opponent was about as strong as the 5th-level demon, the chiropractor, with whom he had fought. His skeleton was very strong, and after he defeated the monster, he took its bone and forged the sword Excalibur from it. Remembering this, the soldier looked at his sword, which could not be broken, and decided that since he was the master of this sword, he also should not be broken. Anderson grabbed Excalibur and began to rise to his feet with determination. Wilhelm was delighted and said that this was worthy of praise, and he expected nothing less from the strongest awakened one. The soldier raised his sword and expressed his desire to fight to the death, and these words delighted Wilhelm. The battle continued and Anderson attacked the hero with all his might, which delighted him. The director, having heard their dialogue, became worried that this was no longer just a duel, but an entire international conflict. When asked to stop the battle, the unit chief replied that they needed another awakener's rank to do so. Selina expressed her opinion that Wilhelm will cope and will not kill anyone and will not lose his temper. Immediately after these words, the building shook and a loud roar was heard from the battle hall. And Selina immediately added that she could also be wrong, and after her words, the director glanced at her sideways. However, the director agreed, saying that his recent behavior showed that he wanted to protect the country. Wilhelm wanted to see the full power of the enemy, but he understood that such actions could cause the building to collapse. Anderson was full of vanity and pride and wanted to prove that he was the strongest in this world. He attacked our hero, piercing his body with a sword, and it seemed that the battle was over. However, this turned out to be just Wilhelm's projection, which said that Anderson had gotten too carried away. The hero appeared from behind the military man and said that if they continue, the weak may die. Anderson extended his sword towards Wilhelm, who grabbed it and asked if he wanted to go out into the open. The shadow of the demon lord loomed over the soldier, and he recoiled in surprise. He broke out in a cold sweat, realizing that he was in danger and that he couldn't escape. Suddenly, Anderson realized the full horror of what was happening and was horrified by the fact that he mentally accepted defeat and was afraid of death. But pride prevailed over common sense, and the soldier attacked the demon lord again. Wilhelm stopped him with a spell and said that pride is the privilege of the strong. He continued by adding that Anderson is just a weakling who boasts about his strength and the fact that he protects people. After these words, Wilhelm slammed Anderson into the ground so hard that the floor cracked. The demon lord had won, and the pureblood lay unconscious. The building where the department's headquarters was located shook, and people in the area took notice. The shock wave also reached Neri and the special squad of wolves, who were in the medical room. Mike said that it was probably Mr. Neri who was losing to Anderson and was begging him for mercy on his knees. Neri began to release an aura and ordered everyone to be silent, as she could no longer bear the insults towards her master. The guys were very surprised by such a change in mood and open hostility. Jensen thought that he thought she was just a maid, but she turned out to be quite strong. Mike asked why she released an aura and if she wanted to fight him by any chance. Nuri replied that he understood everything correctly and she offered him a fight. She remembered her master's instructions that she should not let anyone look down on her. Nuri pulled out her swords and said that Mike would regret insulting her master. Mike felt her strength, but he did not expect that the girl would seriously challenge him to a duel. He looked at his comrade Jensen, mentally asking what he should do. Jensen answered briefly and clearly that everything here had to be finished without unnecessary noise. Mike nodded, but behind his back Nuri was already flying at him, drawing her blades. Suddenly, Nuri was thrown off course and hit by someone else's magic, causing her to lose her balance. It was Jensen's magic, and he said he was apologizing for his comrade, but they should leave it at that. Nuri, rising from the ground, replied that they were the ones who started the conflict, and now they were asking her to stop, without even apologizing for what she said to her master or taking her words back. Standing on her feet, she pointed the swords at Mike and said that he must be punished. Mike himself flared up and said that this was true. Since the battle had started, it had to be continued. Mike was an ice mage and aimed his spells at the girl who was also heading his way. At this time, Wilhelm felt something was wrong as he lifted his opponent's body. He told the people at the bureau not to worry and that he hadn't killed him, but that serious medical attention wouldn't hurt. The director, the boss, and Serena were already happy that today did not end in a political scandal. The director, looking at Wilhelm, was already thinking about how Korea would now be able to fight back against the superpowers with such force. But his thoughts were interrupted by the Demon Lord himself, who said that he was not interested in political games. He warned that the people from the bureau could do whatever they wanted, but most importantly, they should not touch him. Walking down the corridor, Wilhelm came across a wall completely covered in ice. Behind this wall, the wounded Nuri fought for the honor of her master with the last of her strength. No less wounded, Mike enthusiastically informed the girl that victory would ultimately be his. Jensen analyzed the fight and was surprised that Mike had to work hard because of this girl. And the magician himself promised to turn Nuri into an ice cube and began a new spell. The girl grabbed her swords and rushed to attack the man who insulted her master. But suddenly she fell under the influence of an ice spell and ice crystals began to grow from all her wounds. Mike laughed at her, asking what it was like to be an ice cube, while the girl tried to stay on her feet. Jensen decided that Nuri was a good fighter, but not up to a rank, and asked his friend to stop, otherwise they could get into trouble. Suddenly, Wilhelm appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Mike's face with his palm. And then he hit his head against the wall with all his might, and no one could stop the ruler. Mike's body fell to the ground and lay at the feet of an enraged Wilhelm, who was already looking at the second participant in the events. The Lord trampled the face of the boy who lay in his own blood on the floor, asking him how he dared to touch what belonged to him. Jensen was horrified and could not understand what Wilhelm was doing here, because he should now be defeated by Anderson. Wilhelm moved on to his second comrade, saying that they dared to touch his property and must pay with their lives. Suddenly Nuri appeared in front of Jensen, blocking him with her body, and said that she was fine. The next second, the girl fell into the arms of her master and tried to explain the situation. But Wilhelm reassured his maid, saying that he was already nearby and that she was a good girl for standing up for herself and for him. With his magic, Wilhelm healed the wounded girl and all her wounds disappeared. The heroes left the room, leaving Jensen, who was in a daze thinking about the fact that the title of the strongest country was lost. The TV was broadcasting news that the delegation from America had already left the country, and a man was sitting in front of the TV. He said that something incredible must have happened with the new awakened one, but they can't claim to know something they don't know. Guildmaster Ares told the girl with long blonde hair that she needed to meet him first. Meanwhile, at Wilhelm and Nuri's home, Selena insisted that they had to move immediately. The Demon Lord, opening a can of drink, said that he refused and did not want to strain himself, and did not see any reason for this. Selena pointed out the gate, where dozens of journalists were waiting for Wilhelm and trying to take his photo. The girl added that in order to protect Wilhelm from problems, the government is ready to provide them with a new house on the island. The hero looked at his maid, who was already glowing with happiness and joy from the news she had heard. He asked if she liked the idea, to which Nuri replied that she had always wanted to live in a house on an island. Wilhelm agreed, and with his sudden decision stunned Selena, who was already crying in despair. He stood up and told her that they were moving to a new house, and the girl looked at the guy in surprise. The new house on the island was huge, just like the island itself, with several hills and dense jungle. Having seen the island from afar, Nuri was already delighted and kept talking about how beautiful it was here. Selena said that the entire island was bought and they built a house on it with resort conditions, so this place is isolated from the rest of the world. The girl also said that the island has all the conditions for a comfortable life, and Wilhelm agreed that this is not bad. Selena handed over an envelope with documents and said that they had received a letter from the USA, in which it is said that America apologizes for the behavior of their special forces and is ready to conclude an agreement on mutual defense between Awakened's rank. If an enemy appears in one of the countries that the country cannot cope with, then it requests support and vice versa. The details will be discussed later between government bodies, but the final word belongs to Wilhelm. The hero thought that he was not interested in the problems of the states, but if an enemy appeared that Anderson was not able to cope with, then it would be interesting, and he agreed. The girl also voiced a proposal from her superiors to create a new team of awakened ones led by Wilhelm. Wilhelm thought about the proposal and decided that if new people helped create competition for Nuri, she would become stronger. He also agreed with this proposal, but on the condition that he would select the team members himself. Selena thanked him and said that the boat was ready and they could sail to the island. Wilhelm asked Nuri if she was eager to get to the island, and the girl sheepishly agreed. The next minute, the hero grabbed Nuri and rose into the air, saying that there was no need for a boat. On the island, a group of people were already in full swing preparing for the arrival of the owners, and a gray-haired man with long hair pulled back into a ponytail was leading this. Wilhelm landed right in front of the house, holding little Nuri in his arms. The servants were very surprised by the appearance of the owners of the estate, all except that same gray-haired man. The man introduced himself by saying that his name was Alfred, and that he had been appointed manager of this place to ensure maximum comfort. He invited the new owners to follow him in order to inspect the house and the surrounding area. Nuri said that the house was incredibly beautiful inside, and she felt like they were in a hotel. Wilhelm agreed that it was quite nice here, but he also turned to the butler and asked what kind of leisure activities there were, pointing to the chef and bartender. Alfred replied that leisure time should be entirely to the owner's taste. The heroes enjoyed the exquisite dishes prepared by the chef, and then we tried no less delicious cocktails made by the bartender according to the tastes of the heroes. And so, completely relaxed, the guys spent time on the beach on a sunny, beautiful day. Wilhelm was resting under an umbrella, and, while serving a drink, the butler Alfred asked if everything was to his lord's liking, and he answered in the affirmative. A couple of days later, a helicopter arrived on the island, which the heroes noticed from afar. Leader Max came down from the helicopter and said that he hadn't seen this cheerful couple for a long time. He bowed respectfully and thanked Wilhelm again for agreeing to the Bureau's proposal to create a team. Max added that he did not arrive on the island alone and was going to introduce someone. A girl with long blonde hair came out to the meeting, and Max introduced her as Jean, and awakened a rank. The girl looked at Wilhelm, but he didn't pay much attention to this rudeness. Jean looked at Wilhelm and Nuri, and thought that she expected to see someone more majestic, and not a fool with a child running errands. Nuri responded to Jean's rudeness by saying that it is customary to greet someone when entering their home. The blonde responded to this remark with mockery, saying that children had no business here. Jean haughtily told Max that the man in front of her could not stand on the same level as the greatest awakened ones in the world. The leader had already begun to bow and apologize for the behavior of his ward. However, contrary to expectations, Wilhelm approached Jean and said that she was strong enough, and the strong have the right to be arrogant. The hero also added that if you are strong, you must be aware of the difference between yourself and your enemy. And emitting an ominous aura, he said that if an ant causes inconvenience to a person, then he will be crushed. The girl began to shake and could barely stand on her feet. And Wilhelm said that that was enough. Leader Max bowed again and apologized for the girl, saying that it would teach her a lesson. But Wilhelm said that he was intrigued. The gentleman called Jean to follow him, and the girl froze in surprise, not knowing whether she should be happy or crying. Wilhelm also called his subordinate, and she, too, followed her master in surprise. The hero placed the girls opposite each other, saying that he was interested in seeing what they were capable of. Nuri clearly held a grudge against Jean for her rudeness towards her, and immediately drew her blades. The fair-haired girl just looked away absently, saying that she was already ready for battle. Wilhelm warned the girls that they must fight to the fullest, so that he could find out who was stronger. Jean said that in that case, she would also use her power, and a red aura enveloped her. The girl decided to use her shape-shifting abilities and prove her strength. Leader Max watched the process carefully, because it was the first time he saw Jean use his power. After some time, instead of the beautiful, fair-haired girl, a small monster stood in front of Nuri. Wilhelm checked her stats and noted that shapeshifting was an interesting skill that was very common in the demon world. The creature that Jean had turned into looked very much like the monster with the red horn that had killed a huge number of people before Nuri's eyes. The blonde froze in horror, and memories of past days flashed before her eyes. Wilhelm asked his subordinate what she would do against such a creature, and Jin asked if Nuri was so scared that she couldn't move. However, the blonde replied that she, on the contrary, must avenge all the people who were killed and was thirsty for battle. The girls clashed in battle, and the entire main building of the island shook from the roar. The servant asked Alfred if everything would be okay, because the building was shaking as if from an earthquake. Alfred, calmly sipping his tea, replied that everything was fine and that there would be many such cases in the future. The battle between the girls was in full swing. Neither one wanted to give in to the other. Jean was surprised by the power stored in such a small body and conjured a fireball which she sent towards Nuri. However, the swordswoman turned out to be much faster and, having dodged, ended up behind the monster. The blonde swung two swords and Jean dodged at the last second. The monster girl sent Nuri flying with one blow, knocking the swords out of her hands. And then she went straight to her, covering her entire body with fiery mana. Leader Max was worried about the serious turn of the battle, and Wilhelm just smiled watching it. Falling to the ground after the blow, Jin thought that this would be a lesson to the girl, because Jin was still an awakened rank. There was a column of smoke and dust ahead, and the monster girl tried to see her opponent there. But he was not there. Nuri found herself above Jin, and as it turned out, the previous attack did not reach her. The blonde kicked and, landing, pulled her blades out of the magical space. And then she directed it at the face of the high-ranking awakened one, and thus won the victory. Wilhelm chuckled contentedly and stopped the fight, saying that he had seen enough. The transformation wore off, and Jean was shocked to think that Nuri had figured out her weaknesses and thus struck at the right moment. Watching the master praise his servant, Jean thought dejectedly about having lost. However, she understood that if she stayed with Wilhelm, she could become much stronger, and decided to turn to him. But as soon as Jean opened her mouth, Wilhelm immediately said that he refused. The demon lord told her that all she was an interesting skill, and nothing more. But for now she is like a baby to him, so he cannot take her under his wing. And hearing this, Jean fell silent. Afterwards, Wilhelm turned to Leader Max and said that he should have already felt something. Immediately after the Lord's words, Max's phone rang, and he did not understand what the hero meant. As soon as the leader picked up the phone, he heard urgent news from the operator, who reported that Japan had a big problem. The city of Osaka was wiped off the face of the earth. Several private planes carrying awakened people were flying towards Japan. Inside one of them sat Wilhelm, Nuri, and Jean, waiting to arrive at the destination. While eating snacks, Nuri asked the owner why he didn't fly on his own, because that would have been much quicker. However, he asked his subordinate, then why the awakened in the city do not move on foot, because they are faster than cars. Watching the conversation between the two, Jean wondered why they were so calm, because everyone was flying to a battle in which they could lose their lives. Leader Max came up to report the current situation to the awakened ones and took out a tablet. An hour ago, information was received that an unknown gate had opened in Osaka, from which a very strong monster had emerged. Japan's elite awakened were sent to suppress the invasion, but contact with them was lost. Hearing about the possible dead people, Jean shuddered and broke out in a cold sweat. Max added that the Japanese claim that the monster that emerged from the gates of the 8th level is the strongest monster that humanity has ever seen. After this information, Jean began to feel very sick, and it seemed like she was going to vomit. Nuri asked if the girl was okay and said that she didn't expect to see a person get sick on a plane, but the blonde denied everything. Afterwards, Jean asked if Nuri was scared, because they would meet the strongest monster. The blonde replied that the situation was terrible, but they were flying to save people, and besides, they had nothing to worry about. After all, with them was her master, the most powerful awakened one in the human world. Wilhelm looked out the window and thought that if the monster was level 8, it should be stronger than the dragon. The plane arrived in Japan and flew over the completely destroyed city of Osaka. All passengers were asked to put on parachutes and prepare to land over their destination. Wilhelm said that he would go first, and without putting on a parachute, he looked down at the city and jumped. Nuri asked Jean if she was ready to jump, but the girl was shaking and could not tie it properly. The blonde decided to help the girl, who was apparently really afraid. Having secured the parachute, Nuri told her not to be afraid, otherwise she would definitely not be able to fight, and Jin was amazed at her resilience. Nuri said that she just had experience fighting, but Jean was strong, and so she should be fine. Jean was warmed and truly calmed by the words of her recent opponent, and she thanked the girl for them. Nuri said that they would jump on the count of 3, and standing at the edge, she counted to 2. After which, at number 3, she pushed Jean down, and the girl became very scared. A huge spider was waiting for them below, and Wilhelm met it before anyone else. The demon lord was delighted and, taking out his thunder blade, said that he would give the monster a worthy greeting. Among the crowd of corpses, the awakened a rank of Japan Koharu looked ahead in fear. A huge spider was staring at her with all its eyes, making the girl tremble with fear. When Koharu had already decided that she would die, 2 girls came down from above, using an air blast to land. Nuri immediately took out her swords and stood in front of the girl to protect her, which surprised Koharu even more. Using translation magic, Nuri reported that they were awakened beings who had arrived from Korea. Meanwhile, Wilhelm, fighting with the spider, said that he had never seen such freaks before, and seeing the characteristics, he realized that he was facing a fallen god. Wilhelm flew up and said that this was very interesting, because he himself was also an exiled god. The battle of the gods began, from which everything around seemed to rear up and shake. The one who had awakened from Japan watched what was happening, not understanding who these guys were. An explosion occurred, which dragged Koharu away with Jin and Nuri. The 3 awakened girls watched as Wilhelm fought the spider. Nuri turned to Koharu and said that her master was currently fighting the monster, and the Japanese woman was very surprised that it was a man and not a monster in human form. Nuri proudly said that Koharu doesn't have to worry about this monster anymore, because her master will deal with it. However, the Japanese woman reacted somewhat hostilely, saying that such a weak awakened one could not help her in any way. Koharu stood up and yelled at the blonde, telling her to get out of the way and not interfere with her. Jean, in the guise of a monster, said that for a person whose life was recently saved, she was somehow rude to the saviors. She also added that only those who did not need help but were saved are worthy of arrogance, and added that Nuri is also strong. Koharu was just about to enter into a squabble, but Jin informed them that they had guests. The girls turned around and saw other spider-like monsters in front of them. They were much smaller, but there were a lot of them, and the awakened were surrounded. Jin and Nuri prepared for battle, although they wanted to first straighten out the brains of the upstart from Japan. Wilhelm flew towards the main spider monster at full speed, wanting to enjoy the battle. But the monster released a web, and it was too late to stop or change direction. With this web, the fallen god threw the hero aside, and he rudely said that he did not like it. Wilhelm decided that his sword would not be able to harm such an enemy, and he decided to show his true face to the enemy. Wilhelm no longer looked like a man and, grabbing the spider by one of its appendages, said that he was challenging it to death. Flying closer, the hero attacked the fallen god in close combat, after which he took a closer look. I realized that the monster's defense was impeccable, but there were also some downsides that the demon lord figured out. He hit the monster's eye with all his might, causing it to burst and the monster to make a loud, disgusting sound. The sound echoed throughout the ruined city, and everyone in the immediate area had a hard time. Wilhelm also tore off the fang of the spider itself and, raising it above his head, asked if he could withstand this. As the hero expected, the protection did not work, and the fang pierced the spider's flesh. The fallen god began to emit a huge amount of purple smoke from his mouth, and it seemed he was poisoned. Lilac smoke began to fill the space around him, and Wilhelm was surprised. Covering his face,